Hi, this is the third segment of the Firenock Dealer class and Archer Enthusiast. Well, we talk about vane. Now we talk about the next very interesting section, which is the insert and the points. Most people think inserts and points are no big deal. In the crossbow world, we find out how big deal it is. The reason that most people never thought inserts and points are such a big deal because they all use an arrow with an arrow rest. But the moment you have no arrow rest, guess what happened? Concentricity of the archery projectile becomes so critical. Why is concentricity so critical? We have to view the frontal part of archery projectile in two axes. And this is your entire shaft. Okay? But I didn't draw a perfect circle. What does that do if your insert is not concentric with your projectile? That means the moment when the arrow went through a frontal drop, because you know when you push pressure, the arrow is going to bend. It's going to do the first natural bend. With the arrow rest, it's going to control it. Of course, if you use my arrow rest, a lot of this will disappear. But assuming that you are using a crossbow, which you have no arrow rest, the moment the arrow bends, which you can bend under the rail, you go above the rail. You bend like this. Guess what it's going to do next thing? It's going to come up. The moment it comes up, that moment, whatever the inconsistency on the concentric is where you're going to point to. Tim Gillingham and Rod White, one of the two top crossbow shooters, told me the concentricity of the front end of the crossbow component affect over 40% of all accuracy. That's a very big percentage. Which means that how do we guarantee that, by knowing so, how do we guarantee the components in the frontal part, which is the business end of an arrow, to be concentric to the shaft? Is what this whole segment of the class is about. How do we guarantee the point, the insert, the shaft are all concentric? In the old days, on a glue-in point, how do you know that it's indeed centered? You just assumed. When you put in an insert, which everybody loves, oh, I just glued the insert in it, and it is concentric. Is it really concentric? Nobody knows, because just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's concentric. And why did some company like using the HIT insert on other inserts? Because it's nowhere to be seen. And when you put a broadhead on an HIT insert, what's the OD of the neck of a normal broadhead? 5/16. No. The neck. The neck of the broadhead is about 200. What's the idea of an eastern axis shaft? 202 to 204. You are letting go of 4/1000ths of an inch every time, and you tell me it's going to be right. Now 202 to 204, and you're giving up 4/1000ths. Think about it. What's the percentage? 2% minimum. That's on the neck, not on the head. The head is 5/16 or 8 millimeter. That much room are you giving up? So, how do we really address this entire concentricity issue? And in this big issue, which I consider one of the biggest downfall of the archery history until I come along, is that nobody ever attempt to address it. You know what they do? They try to bandage the issue. They put something called a broadhead adapter, make it wider, so it doesn't look like it was off. Or they put O-rings, one big giant O-ring, so that when you twinge on it, it's not moved. Is it really centered? No, it is never ever centered. If it's centered, it's by luck. So how do we concentrate the shaft to the insert? Every time. That was the trick. And that's what this whole segment is about. Let's go back to our shaft size. What are the three major shaft sizes we're dealing with?
G-knock, A-knock, S-knock.
Exactly. You can see there's three on the major size. What are the size of our broadhead that we know that we always use? 8 millimeter on the OD, which is 5/16. And the center neck is 832, which is around 200. Now, look at this number. You instantly know there's no way in hell you can push a 200 into 166. So we already know just by design 166 you can never ever put an insert in. If you do, this is what's going to happen. This is your 166 insert. Your insert, you end up look like this. And the inside will be like this. This is what, quote unquote, the typical VAP insert look like. The thread is right here. If you want to bend this, what's your fulcrum point? That's your leverage. How easy to bend this?
It's snap.
Exactly. Now, people say, how can I overcome this? The inside thread of a 1032 is how big? 0.164 inches. The moment you understand the thread neck is 200 and the thread itself is actually 0.164, the magic begins. That means if you design an outsert system, that do this, and now your field point should be like this. What's your fulcrum point? Here. Guess what? 1, 2, 3 material. Simultaneously, it becomes the strongest point. Compared to the, see that wicker sling right here? What's on it? Nothing. The only string you have is this piece of steel. This piece is gouging the 2 pieces of carbon. Well, at this point, we have the outsert, we have the carbon, and we have the screw. It becomes the strongest. And what's the size of this size? 8 millimeter, which is 5/16 compared to 0.66. Isn't that ridiculous? And that's exactly the difference between the two designs for the 166 system. Now this is not old, this is not new. This system is actually very old.
Yeah.
If you look at the old Beeman design, it's all identical.
I used to shoot that, yeah.
Yes. Why is that design abandoned? Look at page 13. That will give you exactly what this system was supposed to do. I got a cutout diagram. You can see exactly at where this, where the second arrow of the 0.670, 170 millimeter on the middle part, you can see that that line is where the insert, the thread, and the carbon all there. So that is about 2 millimeter of space where all three overlapped. Means that all your three majors right here are aligned. They give you all the absolute strength. Well, this gives you no strength. You force the carbon to open. It will protect the carbon. Now, by doing this, what have I done with concentricity? At this very moment, nothing. What I'm getting, I'm registering is the strength. But why what am I, remember when I talk about all this shaft, the concentricity is critical. But in this class of shaft, the concentricity is not as critical. Do you know why? Because every single shaft in the outside is called, the shaft are both built based on the mandrel. You roll the carbon on the outside, and then you put it on the mandrel and you grind the outside to get even space or the even weight, and that's how you make your shaft. Called centered grind. But when you deal with the shaft of this size, you can't trust the mandrel. You end up doing a centerless grind. When you do a centerless grind, what's going to happen? You cannot trust the thickness of the shaft. That means you put anything inside, the outside is going to be non-concentric because the thickness of the wall of the shaft is not guaranteed.
Consistent, yeah.
So, by putting an insert into an inconsistent shaft, you are guaranteed to be non-concentric. So the only thing we know of this class of shaft that we can trust is the OD, not the ID. Because the shaft, to be exaggerated, the shaft can actually look more like this. Just because you put an insert in, the difference in wall thickness, of course this is super exaggerated,
Yeah.
but you can see the difference. If you look at all the 1/6 shaft, they all have this tendency. So the only thing you can really trust on this shaft is the OD of the shaft. The moment I recognize the design, recognize the manufacturing process, the only solution is indeed an outsert. An outsert is a very complicated, tedious, and extremely expensive proposition. Why? It is not a single drill, mill, die process. With an insert, you can cut the inside, mill the whole side outside in one time, you're done. When you do an outsert, where's the thread? In the middle. There's a drill process in the front, and there's a drill process on the back. And in case of an aero outsert, it's even more complicated. Because what's the number one thing everybody hates about ouserts? The moment you shoot the back target or an animal, you cannot pull the arrow back out. Then we look into physics. Why can't you put the arrow back out? Because the outsert is bigger. Does bigger mean that you can't put it back out? No! It is because of the wedging effect. See, the moment when the arrow moves into a meat, the meat will shrink. And when you put it back, you wedged it. You wedge it because you have a very good grip. How do you reduce this grip? Reduce friction. How do you reduce friction? Reduce contact surface. The next thing you notice that on all the Firenock outsert system, we start just like this one with the 597. Give you guys at least, this is the first generation we have.
Okay, so it's tapered.
Not just tapered. You notice that is what we call, this is also patent and trademarked.
Rib?
It's called the blood channels.
Not channel?
We learn one thing. Every time when you put channels on it, guess what? Just like you can't grab a bunch of knives, but you sure can get a bottle. The moment there's a knife there, you cut. You just go right through. And that indeed is the blood channel. Now you notice that when I first designed aero outsert, I screwed up. On the very end of it, I do cut like this, just to the right size. And finally, I recognize my mistake. And every single aero outsert now, at the very end, it's not just tapered, it's also rounded. Just like this one, compared to the one you just have. You can see the difference in design. Now, how do you install an aero outsert correctly on a shaft if you know there's so much problem? I went through the same process like I do every time. There's a video on the internet. I will show you. First of all, you cut your shaft, and you cut it and make sure it's squared. You dry fit all 12 ouserts, because since it's a centerless grind, there's going to be variation from all the shaft. Unfortunately, a lot of customers do not know the difference between 1000 strictness and consistency of OD. Outside diameter have nothing to do with strictness. So just because you buy 1,000 straighteners doesn't mean that the shaft have no variance. And after you dry fit every one of them, now this is where the tough part is. The OD of every single shaft, of every single batch manufacturer, of every single spine is different. There's always going to be variance. Manufacturer have a single mandrel, 166. They roll, say, 25,000 carbon on it, that becomes a 400 spine. Pro 28,000 on it, it become 350 spine. Throw 30,000 on it, that 40,000 on it, it become 300 spine. That becomes, of course, depends on how with the modular carbon it is. But remember, it's on the same mandrel. After they build it, they test it, it's too heavy, they grind. So what's the OD? Whatever is needed to make it meet the specification. So how do you supply the world knowing that this is absolutely never ever consistent? By giving them the whole spectrum. So instead of making 1, 2, or 3, I have 10. And it's only good for anything from 400 spine all the way to 250 spine. I can't even do the 300 spine because this gets so thick, it exceeded the capability of an outsert. Unless I'm willing to make this into 9mm, then I have something to cover it. Because this wall gets so thick, it exceeded here. Now, how do you install this outsert correctly? I said you dry fit it, okay? You see every one of them. If it is not the right size, how do you reduce the carbon outside diameter to fit the outsert? Never ever attempt to drill the inside of the outsert. You can't. You guarantee to screw this up. Because it's so precisely machined on both sides. This for the front has to be right. 5.5mm on the back, whatever the number that is on the outsert. Those are plus and minus half thousandths. So what do? You hold the sandpaper on one hand with a little bit water, and you put your shaft in it and you rotate. Just turn the shaft. Don't do both. You rotate one side, you're going to take it out correctly. And take it one side and 2 turns, go back and check the shaft. Do a few more turns, go back and check the shaft. That is the only way to not screw up the OD consistent of the shaft when you fit an outsert. Is it a lot of work? You bet. But there is no other way if you want to shoot the 166 size shaft. The outsert is the best. Now after you fit them together, what do? After you clean all the shaft, dry fit every one of them, the first thing you do, lay them down exactly the right sequence. Clean all the shaft with acetone. Denatured alcohol ain't gonna cut it.
Okay, now acetone on the carbon shaft is not going to break down the...
No, it's not.
Okay.
It is true in the Beeman days because they are based on resin.
Okay.
Every single shaft today are based on epoxy.
Okay.
Acetone have no epoxy on epoxy. It's inert. Okay. Next thing you know, a lot of people didn't do. They did not clean the inside of this. I don't care, even I clean it perfectly. Go through all the places, dust, dirt, grime. You push some powder, they all is sitting inside here. Use Q to clean the inside of your outsert. So when you lay them down, lay them up exactly the same way, clean them the same way, put them out the same way. So you know your pile. Like number your shaft, number your insert, put them together right. Then you put slow set epoxy, not in the insert. A lot of people do. They put the slow set epoxy inside the insert and then shove the snuff down there. Guess what happened? That's what you just did.
Put it on the threads.
You just put it on the threads and close this hole. The only place you ever want to put epoxy on an outsert is on the very front end of the shaft. Okay? After you put it in, you always hold your shaft and you rotate and spin when you push the shaft down. This is one thing that a lot of people say, oh, just right, I'm using super glue. Shaft! You just guarantee yourself 2,000 variants. And you have no way to fix it. So the only glue we recommend is 24 hours slow set epoxy. That's the only glue you should ever use with outsert. And after you install it, you need to put on a spinner to spin it once to make sure it's right. If it doesn't look right, what do you want to do? You want to grab the insert, hold the shaft, do a 180-degree turn, and do the spin again. You hold the shaft, hold the insert, spin 180 degrees until it's good again. The moment it becomes good, what do? You stand the shaft straight up in a place and let it be for 24 hours. If you leave it on a table, guess what's going to happen? The weight of it is going to come down. You guarantee whatever you just did, you just undo. That is the installation process of an aero outsert, and why an aero outsert can be concentric, can be reliable, and how we understand physics and make this thing strong. Questions? You don't have a question? I thought you do. You seem to have a question. Okay, now.
I was doing things right by mistake, I think. Because every time I did that, my arrows were up this way, but I didn't know there was a reason behind it. I just did it.
Okay, now, this is the 166. The next one we want to address is the 202. The 202 size, the traditional, like Eastern first come out, is supposed to be a really big deal. It's called an HIT insert. As I said already, the carbon tube is right here. You've got to insert the screw inside the tube. Okay? Your broadhead goes like this, go in, and the thread goes like this.
No, in that insert, isn't there more threads? Is that the reason behind this?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. Telling people a 1040 and an 832, the 1040 and more threads. It's telling me that if I give you 5 packages of 1 ounce, it's better than me giving you 1 package of 8 ounce. You're getting a lot of marketing hype.
Yeah, that's right.
As far as insert is concerned, ratio, strength, and physics is the only thing that matters. What is the contact surface? Carbon. What does carbon do under high impact? It oscillates and it vibrates. The only thing known to mankind to prevent it is to put a collar on it, capture it, control it, and contain it. How are you containing that system in the HIT system?
There's no buffer.
There is absolutely none. The buffer is right here, your carbon. That's the reason everybody who should broadhead with the HIT system, especially mechanical, all these things are chewed up right here. You end up going squaring and squaring and squaring and squaring and saying, and yeah, I'll go and shoot a few more times, because when the blade goes back, it's metal on carbon. Carbon lose every time. Is this a decent system? Based on what they do at this moment, yes. But is that a better way? Absolutely. This is what we did in Firenock. We actually created an aero insert A system. The thread, we move this chunk forward and let the thread be in here. So we move this whole thread in the very top. This is what Trophy Ridge have come up with, but they understand very well. They do this. They do a lip to cover the carbon so the carbon won't break, but also create a problem. It limits the size of the carbon size you can buy, because every single aero size shaft based on different spine is different thickness. So if you make one for one specific brand, for one specific spine, yes, The moment you stiffen one, this lip has no value. How do you overcome this? Like a 90 degree and big enough. What's the worst case scenario? You fill the variation with epoxy, since you're going to epoxy glue it anyway. Just roll it, lift it. What is this benefit of this 45 degree?
Concentricity.
Exactly, concentricity. It's like this, holding a funnel. You throw a marble in it. What do you think the marble is going to be? At the absolute bottom. Or you're throwing a wood block into a hole that you know is tapered. Where do you think it's going to be? Right in the middle. Now imagine this, you put this thing on. You glued it with so-set 2-part epoxy, and you start shooting this. The edge of this carbon at 90 degrees is going to crumble. It's going to crumble, it's going to crumble, it's going to crumble. Because we know carbon is not solid. It will crumble. It is technically it's a very fluid substance in the sense of fluidity. It will crumble and you will lose because this is harder material. Guess what happened? You give and you give and you give until you hit the bottom. But it's still
No buffer.
no buffer, stopped, locked. If this side hit first, which means that this is offset by this much, right? And guess what? It's going to stop. It's going to slowly bring it down until it is perfect. Then it concentrates. That's the reason Aero Insert A. You can glue the sucker 10,000 run out. Go and shoot it 20, 30, 40 times, it'll be 5,000 straight. If you use this system and it's not squared, or the broadhead is catching the carbon, what's going to happen to it? You're going to run out like it was out of style. That's the reason company like us, or like G5, or like Lumina, make aero squaring device. They try to fix this problem. It's like we having disc brakes, keep grinding this like crazy until there's no more. But if we fix it on day one, do we have to grind it? It's perfect the first time. And that is exactly what Aero Insert A. This is another pattern we got. The Aero Insert A, the Aero Outsert, and the Aero Insert D are the three big things with Firenock.
So on that setup there, you don't have to square your shaft. You're taking that up with your epoxy.
No, you always square it up with your shaft.
Okay.
Because see, if this is not squared and you start pounding it, the in square side will actually force it to be off. Because you start with the wrong piece to start with. So squaring your shaft is so critical, and that's the reason, to be frank with you, I have done enough squaring of shaft with my hand. And that's the reason I will not use anything but my Aero preparation system. Because the other one are torture device.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
If you are trying any other device, if you do, I would say, go do 3 dozen and square 3 dozen arrow for me. You're putting somebody through this torture.
Yeah. I mean, just doing 1 dozen on the G5 is pretty tough.
We shall not name names.
Okay.
Preserve other people's intent. Even they are bad, they are out there. You guys tried this already, right?
Yeah, at the show.
This is where it makes it so much easier. Because see, you do not use this like the other one use fingers, because there's rollers. Use your palm to rock it. That's how you can square, insert, and so on. With this one, you absolutely have to square it every time you go hunt, if you hit something hard. If you don't square this, your point is for sure guaranteed to bend. Okay, there's an Aero Insert A for the 204 size. You notice that this whole piece is actually standing, the neck of the shaft is actually in here. But the rest of the thread is in here. So I just moved this piece up that much and added this to it. And that's what the Aero Insert A for the 204 does. Okay, now move to the 246. What's so special about the 246? This is the most common size insert everybody uses. unless you use Crossbow, that's a 300. The 246 size, every typical, like the typical insert, they look like this. The shaft go like this, right? We know the ID is perfect, but what does 204 class have? Every single variable under the moon. So if you make one insert and want to make it perfect, you need to make at least 5 of them. That's the minimum. As a dealer, how many do you really want to carry? 1. So how do you make sure, because usually the case, the one you want is the one you run out. How do you overcome this insert if you know there's going to be 4,000 variants? Do the same thing with my Aero insert A. But since the shaft is so big, how do you guarantee the back not going crazy on you? Put a ball joint in. That is my Aero insert AS. So the moment when you put this thing in it, this becomes movable. Because you know the shaft is reasonably soft. We can push. And that's the reason all the Aero insert is built on 2445 on this ball. But with gold tip, because of the glue and the shaft, I can just rely on this. That's the reason it's so tight in carnivore. It's extremely tight in carbon impact. But that worked. It actually gives you a perfect alignment of the shaft. Because now you have 2 alignment points that you can trust. And this is what Aero insert AS look like. See, on the very, very end, it's actually a ball joint. And if you look at the back of this piece, it's more like this, isn't it? Now what does this piece do? Same thing, just like we discussed in the Aero insert A. When you force it, the carbon is going to crumble. When you first come in, the carbon is going to be right here, right? It's going to crumble, which make it force it lower and lower and lower and lower and lower until eventually this whole piece will be jam-packed in here. Where's it going to go? Nowhere. Why is this so critical? Because see, we know that when you hit heavy object, a carbon tube will oscillate and vibrate. This way, and this way. What are we the most afraid of? Is this way. When you hold it like this, what did we just did?
Control it.
We just controlled the entire head.
It's not going to mushroom on
Exactly. You couldn't mushroom it just by pure physics. And as I shoot more, how off can this get? It couldn't.
it. Got to get straighter.
It's going to get straighter. That's the beauty of it. Everything you're afraid of just disappeared. Isn't that fun?
Yep.
What's the worst case scenario? Somebody stupidly pushed this into concrete, the fuel point is off, and you end up with the head like this. How bad is it? Ta-da! Put a 200 grit sandpaper, sand it back. You're good to rock. Can you trust the rest of the piece? The ball joint with a reverse tapered? What not to trust? Physics are beautiful.
Yeah.
They don't lie to you, and they will never change on you. Which concluded our 204. Now, we talk about Aero outsert, we talk about Aero insert A. All the way to 246. What's the next step? What's the next size up? What happened to 235? What happened to 285? There's not enough in the market for me to worry. I'll let those guys worry about it. Now we want to focus on Aero Insert D. What's D stand for? Double. Actually should be Aero Insert DS. Double shoulder. That's where the magic of the beginning of all the Firenock in the Crossbow class components. We all know in the early days, all Crossbow 300 class or above have one of the weakest link. The highest spine Crossbow before Tech 15 comes out is a 300 spine shaft. Think about it. You got a 300 spine shaft pushing 400 feet per second. What do you think it's going to do to it? Now you know why all the aero don't shoot right. Then you talk to all the aero manufacturers. They're not interested in making anything heavier. With the absolute limited supply of material, with the crossbow speed going higher, what other choice you got? This is the shaft of a typical 300 spine shaft. This is a typical insert. Usually make of brass or steel. Why? Because the arrow is so short. You need to be able to break the arrow up a little bit, otherwise it won't fly right. So the average is about 110 grain, just for the insert. The Tech 15 have a 2-part insert. That's about 75 grain. So, knowing this, how can we possibly make these shafts stiffer if we have no more people willing to make this stick thicker? By doing this. Introduce a secondary tube. The moment you introduce secondary tube, assume the outer shaft is a 26-inch shaft. The inside is a 10-inch shaft, with this being half an inch. What's the effective bending range of this shaft?
16 inches.
Just under 16 inches. When you bend a 16-inch shaft, how much stiffer is it compared to a 26?
Much more.
Exactly. Next thing, this is made of brass, 110 grain. What happens if I make this out of 70-75? This now become 18 grain. How much more I got to roll with to maintain the same weight?
You got 92 grain of tube to burn up.
I have 92 grain of tube to burn up. Exactly. If I lose any, remember, for the first 20 yards on the arrow flight, the weight is only thing that matters. Have I changed the weight?
No.
What have I just do to the shaft?
Stiffen the shit out of it.
Good. That's exactly what happened. I stiffened the shit out of that shaft. Now, are you ready for all the magic about arrow shaft, arrow point target system, technology? This whole thing is actually happened right here in the research. When we first do this, we just put the first shaft behind the second shaft. This becomes the weakest link. But the moment we make the shaft with a double shoulder, guess what happened? This shaft becomes part of the insert. How off can this insert be? You are now, instead of dealing with a 3/4 inch or 2-inch insert, you have an insert that is 10-inch long, or more precisely, 10.5 inch. How not center can it get? Exactly! You cannot! Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Now, let's go one step further. By putting a secondary shaft in the first shaft, what's happening to the first shaft? This is a very interesting thing. I'm going to take this away, okay? This is a very interesting phenomenon just happened, which a lot of research just happened, and I happened to learn it. A normal shaft is going to bend like this. That's the bending frequency of the shaft. By inserting a certain amount of tube, it is like I'm having this bowstring and somebody put a finger right here. This whole string is actually going to vibrate very much like this. And because, guess what? This is actually a good representation, because this transition part, guess what? It actually expands itself and change the property of this segment. It is not this. It is actually behave more like this, this, and this.
Consistent oscillation.
You actually change the oscillation frequency significantly from a simple harmonic into a triple harmonic system. And since they cannot be off phase, this system actually more or less, the resulting of it is more or less like this.
So now are you making inserts for the different manufacturers? Okay, great.
All of the above.
Awesome.
Now you know what the aero target concept is.
Yeah.
This is what the aero bow is. Now you know why the aero bow is so different. Because see, now, this another thing happened. Look at this. This resulting frequency is slowly on this part, slowly, and then graduate, and then bend up. This is gradually bent down. Look at what it is. You look at fish in reverse on the harmonics. This whole section technically has no frequency oscillation at all. All the frequencies are here. And even if you try to do, this part prevent it from happening. So the arrow, instead of bending like this, is also bending like this. This is what happened, in layman's term. A normal arrow will do this in the first 15 yards. This arrow will stop oscillating altogether in 7 feet and go full gyro.
Wow.
Now you know why the Tech 15 arrow of mine go crazy. Imagine you go gyro at 7 feet with no sound, no oscillation, but just perfect spin. And I got arrow thing to push it. What do you think it's going to do to this shaft? In the case of Jim's sculpted crossbow on the Velocity 165, it launched out his bow at 435 feet per second to start with. Wow. And at 60 yards, it dropped like a 475. You gain 50 feet per second on drop. Those numbers are not to sneeze at. Some people will kill for 5 yard drop, but this will drop 50 yards in drop. Now, I did the same system in the CXL and the Black Eagle Challenger. Tim Boykin, one of the ASA Open Pro, had proved to me, because he just said, Dodge, you know, this stuff is so complicated. I just need to digest this. 2 weeks later, I built a dozen in Paris, Texas last year. He proved to me, this arrow will fire his bow at 297 feet per second, but it will drop like a 325 to 327. He gained 30 feet per second on drop. Anything after 35 yards, that's what he's seeing. Now, how much it is for you guys, for the guy who actually do ASA seriously, or do 3D seriously, worth? It is about number 1 and number 2, if not number 3. Is what you're giving up every season. What do you have? Take a closer look at this shaft. See that now?
Yep.
See how straight this segment is?
Yep.
See, this segment will come in, and you, because of strictness, you're forcing. It didn't stop. You're forcing the rest of this to bend. It's like a furrow effect on the fishing rod. This part, the end of the fishing rod, will actually force the further to stiffen. That's the reason there's actually 3 different spines on this rod. And that's exactly why 3 frequency. But since they cannot overlap each other, it ends up the resulting frequency is what you look like. Now you know why the crossbow both fly like that.
Yeah.
It's all because of arrow insert D, the double shoulder. Can we expand this further? Absolutely. This is only the beginning of my design. Can we do it on a regular arrow? To a certain extent, yes, but it's not worth it. The moment when you have shaft that's bigger, lighter, like this, it really makes a big difference that you feel it. There's no weight penalty, isn't it? Yeah, flex it from the front to the back, you can really feel it. No, you have to flex in section by section, then you really see it.
Yeah. Wow.
Now having this, knowing this, what's left? We have addressed the oscillation, the harmonic, the frequencies of a shaft. Think about it. One of the things that everybody was talking about is the archery paradox of how the arrow shaft on a normal arrow shaft flex. Guess what? When the arrow shaft flex, what's it using? Energy. When it's flexing, the direction of the tip is changing it's a chaos. The faster we can control it, the more energy we conserve. There's flex in the veins, we control that. Inconsistent or not, we control that. The oscillation on the fundamental frequency of the shaft, we control that. What do you think is going to happen to that shaft? That is the result. So what's left? How come this shaft is still not flying as perfect as we need to?
The point's not.
The point is not concentric. How do we control the point? The typical insert, the point, going to insert, and then the screw. This whole area is your problem. Sad part is that there's a lot of insert. No matter what I do, it's not going to work. Because the machining of the insert is not concentric. So the only way left is to put the insert, put a fuel point, put an arrow squarer, a spinner. You spin and spin, you test and test, you loosen, you tighten, you tighten, you loosen, you loosen, you tighten, until you are right. Then you tighten as much as you could and you pray you never moved, which you know you guarantee to move. That's the reason in all the target shootings, they always say glue-in point are only accepted in open class, ASA. The moment we go hunter class, you have screw-in points. And last year I come along, I turned the thing upside down. Now, the target point screw-in points are more concentric than glue-in points. How? First, I have arrow insert that I know I use 70-75. They are all machined. They are not screw machined. They are CNC machined. They are plus and minus half thousandths. So we know the hole in both sides of the wall is perfect. We know the whole inside is perfect. So how do we guarantee the point to put in this hole is perfect? There's always gap. This is 5.5 and the shaft is 5. How do we handle this 5 millimeter variance? By introducing 2 O-rings. This is old technology. Anybody who do double pipe fitting use O-rings. O-rings are the engineer's best friend. They're cheap, they're reliable, they're consistency, and they do exactly what they are told. The moment you put an O-ring on it, the pressure that you put on the rubber on both of them, identical. What happened to these 2 pipes? They will be concentric. But in case of a fuel point, You notice the second O-ring, which is called the Firenock FAC system. Firenock Aero's concentric technology. That's our trademark, trade name, for anything that use these O-ring systems. Think about it. All the broadhead that you put on your arrows, how many times you put it on and you spin it, it wobble like shit. It's not because the broadhead is bad, it's not because the insert is bad, it's not because shaft is bad, because they are all bad. Now you just hope for the best. But with this system, you can guarantee if your insert is right, it's square. When the field point or broadhead is made right, it will be concentric. Have you guys ever filled a Firenock FAC system? I'll let you feel the difference. This is a non-FAC system field point. Put it in. Put it in 2/3. And then see how much wobble you got. Screw in all the way. And then do a fast spin. I'll guarantee not be straight. Okay. Now put in. Okay. Now put in the Firenock FAC technology field point. Push it in first. Push and then rotate. Now spin it. I know it's not all the veins on it, that's the problem. But you can pretty much.
It's a lot better than it was.
That is exactly what the Firenock FAC technology is about. It's how do you this is now able to concentrate the system. We already licensed, 2 other products in the market is already licensed and marketed this system. The first one is the Smoke Ramcat. The other one is a Hardcraft Trophy. All the Hardcraft Exchange broadheads, they all have the Firenock FAC system in it. So if you want to use broadhead and not be worried about headache of it moving, you're absolutely going to love it. Now, knowing this part, knowing the points, system, and so on, now addressed. When you put a system like this together, the weight, the distribution are so critical. How do you address, say, using the original FAC technology, using a double shoulder insert to rate this? The normal glue-in point is 100 in the field in the target world. How do you address the rest? This cannot be 100 grain. We know that the shoulder is 18. The tube has to be at least 30. Well, that's 55. What's left? 45. 45 it is. No, not yet. Now, feel this new 45 grain tip. See, with that, the shape is not ideal. So how do we get the shape back and able to punch through cinder blocks, glass, steel wall, steel 18 inch, but 50 gallon drum, 18 gauge steel? GR5 titanium. You pulverized cinder block with that tip. Yes, don't shoot with your friends. You end up with no friends. You want to turn it and feel how good it is? remember, he have not spin it. He have not do anything, he just put it together. Now let me show you. That's the easiest way to see. That's what you can do with this system. That concluded our entire aero from front to back.